is up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 365. Big show tonight. We get to welcome back one of our dear friends who's a fantastic guest we've had on the show before. She's our resident registered dietitian. Maria Dalzot is going to be joining us on the show tonight. We're going to be talking a bit about a subject that probably more on the serious end, but also one that I think we can all learn from and that we can all understand a little bit better, maybe understand some of the shame and blame and things like that that are associated with eating disorders, as well as the difference between disordered eating. Because I've heard a lot of these terms. We've seen a lot of stories get shared on social media and stuff like that. So we thought it would be best to bring on a professional, Maria Dalzot, to chat a little bit about understanding that and some of the topics of conversation, how we can navigate through them. And I don't know. I'm really excited about tonight's show because I think Maria is such a good voice specifically around food, eating. We've had her on a number of times because of this. And I think tonight's going to be a really special show. So I'm excited.
I'm excited.
The show begins now.
Ginger Runner.
Yay! What is up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 365. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy Mondays to spend a little bit with us.
You got there.
I got the sentence out at some point. I'm excited about tonight's show. We're going to be talking about basically we're gonna attempt to understand eating disorders in athletes and how athletes have been dealing with them, and we've been seeing a lot of stories shared on social media of high profile athletes talking about their struggles with eating disorders and shame and blame and things like that that are associated with these. We have our dear friend Maria Dalzot, who is a registered dietitian, joining us on tonight's show. She's going to help us sort of navigate the waters a little bit. And I'll just preface this entire show by saying Maria is going to be a great source of education for all of us, Kim and myself included. So if I've already told Maria, if my language is inappropriate or does not navigate the space appropriately, please correct me. And Maria's like, don't worry, we got this. And this is going to be a great community discussion. We are live. So Kim, what's going on?
Yeah, just as Ethan just mentioned, we are live. We'll be bringing Maria on in just a second. So if you do have questions or comments, or if you want to join the conversation, please join us in the chat.
And
Having a tough one today,
my words aren't coming out. Like, I'm basically pronouncing everything wrong.
I think it's because you shaved your beard.
It
took your filter off.
It took my filter off. That is what is happening. Before we introduce our guest, Maria, and before we start diving into topics of conversation and stuff like that, we do have individuals that we like to thank at the top of every Ginger Runner Live. It is because of them that we're able to do these shows on Mondays, our daily live streams, our reviews that also drop today, do all of our races and everything like that. We call them our GR crew. It is this incredible community of individuals from around the world that support us over on Patreon, patreon.com/thegingerrunner. There's all sorts of tiers with all sorts of perks and stuff like that. So we'd love for you to join the GR crew. The community is growing and just fantastic. There's so many really cool perks, from the Discord server to a book club to all sorts of great stuff. Two individuals in particular at that top tier we like to mention at the top of every Ginger Runner Live, just to recognize their contributions to this community and to everything that we do. Brian Sands. Brian Sands has been a longtime supporter. He himself has run his first marathon, ultra marathon. He just last year ran his first 100-miler and is currently training for a whole bunch of bigger stuff. He's a true inspiring individual. We just love having him be a member of the crew. And Rick Bjarnason and his company CheekyMonkeyMedia.ca. They're a web design and a web maintenance company. They redesigned the gingerrunner.com website. They maintain it. They're just a wonderful company. And Rick himself is an ultra runner, super talented, seasoned ultra runner. So we just love having him be a part of the community as well. So shout out to those two individuals and the GR crew at large. All right. So yeah, we're live and we're about to introduce our guest. She comes to us all the way from a couple hours north here in Washington State, but a very beautiful region of the state. We're so lucky to have her back on the show. She is a continuing source of education and knowledge around food and eating and everything like that. Maria Dalzot.
Yay!
Yay! Hi, Maria.
Welcome back.
Hello. Thank you so much.
We love having you on the show. I think we tell you this every time, but you really have sort of become our resident a registered dietitian, RD, and I feel like anytime that we have you on the show, we leave a little bit smarter and a little bit more patient with ourselves, especially around the topics of food. Because we've had a whole range of topics with you in the past. And what's interesting about tonight's conversation is I think a lot of it sort of comes around to this sort of topic of eating disorders and disordered eating and stuff like that. So before we dive into that, of course, I just want to catch up with you and curious what you've been up to, because I know you've been running a ton, racing a ton. Are you getting ready to go to Europe?
I am. Yes. Yes. So, yeah, training's been going well. I'm getting ready. I'm leaving for Europe next Monday I'll be running the sister race of UTMB, the OCC, which is about 34, 35 miles. So that takes place a week from Thursday.
Wow.
So, so I'm really grateful that I had a strong buildup preparing for that. So now it's just time to rest up and not do anything crazy before the race. So that's really exciting. And we're going to be over in Europe for 5 weeks. And after I race the OCC, I'm going to rest for 3 weeks, and then I'll be running another about 55-kilometer mountain race called the Danse du Midi, which is a circumnavigation of a mountain range in Switzerland. And it's really special because it's the 50th running of this race, and it's the oldest ultra in Europe. So,
Wow.
and it just so happens to be in the backyard of the place we're staying at. So there's a lot of really special elements. So OCC is where I want to go and really perform physically well. And the second race is where I want to mentally perform well, because there are going to be a lot of really challenging obstacles in this race that'll keep me on my feet. So
you are, continuing to inspire as well, because, we've talked about some of our mental blocks and stuff like that, just in running, and shared our stories, you and I, and our families and stuff. Seeing what you've been up to in the last few months is like, man, Maria's really crushing it, getting around volcanoes, doing Wonderland stretches for a long time there. Have you been able to enjoy the backyard here in the Pacific Northwest? Have you been able to get out and get a lot of your training in for these races in preparation?
Yeah, we've been, I mean, as soon as the mountains opened up, we're very lucky that we can take our jobs on the road if we have to. And Tad, my husband's COVID project, was building out a van. So we jumped on that bandwagon, and we've been enjoying Levon as much as possible. So we've been, like you said, going to Rainier, and we went to the Olympics and are all around Baker. And so I feel um, like I'm going into this race like there's nothing more that I could have done. And so that's very rare that you can say that.
Yeah.
And from the mental side of it, the work that I'm doing with my clients, it's very much a parallel process. While I don't have the lived experience of an eating disorder myself, there are so many parallels with living anxiety. And so I work alongside my clients of being with difficult thoughts, emotions, and sensations and urges to run away. And their strength definitely helps me be stronger to take on these longer mountain days.
It's going to be super fun to follow along. And, obviously you and Tad take incredible photos. So being able to live vicariously through everything you guys are going to adventure through in Europe, it's going to be fun from our end, just to see all the beauty and stuff like that.
I appreciate that. We're super lucky to be going back there, for sure.
And I love that you guys built out a van too.
Yeah, I love that. That was the COVID project.
The COVID project.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
So I mean, let's sort of dive in here, because these are topics of conversation that we've talked about on the show before. We've sort of touched the periphery with you in the past, but I'm super curious. There's a couple things I think to kind of set the stage here. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you approach it, or at least your education, and how you've had to deal with eating disorders, or even just like what's your experience, so that we know that where you're coming from as a registered dietitian, and how that sort of affects how we talk about things throughout tonight's show.
Okay. Well, I'm going to set the stage before we set the stage, if that's okay.
Perfect.
I would like to first state all of my unearned privileges so that everybody listening knows, everybody watching knows that I am very aware of. I am white. I am cisgendered. I am a thin and able-bodied person. I was raised in an environment where I had religious freedom. I have not experienced food insecurity. I have not experienced financial insecurity. I have not experienced oppression of any of my identities. It's also important that I acknowledge how limited my knowledge is based on my personal lived experiences. And people's lived experiences have not been as prioritized as diet culture's messages. And so it's really important that my job is to elevate the experiences of my clients and those suffering with those challenges. So I just want to state that I'm aware of all those unearned privileges that that I don't have to have those hurdles in my day-to-day life where many people do.
Mm-hmm.
And just to reiterate, just to keep this as safe a space as possible, that's not for any of us to determine, but in order to try to make this a safe space, I just gently request that anybody in the comment section, please be mindful of staying away from using any numbers, calorie counts, weight numbers, or any specific behaviors that might be bothersome. But if you yourself feel not ready to listen to this conversation, we're going, again, try to keep it as safe as possible. But if it's not something that it feels right to you in this moment at this time, that's cool. You can listen to it on your own time, come back when you're feeling in a place where you're better able to receive it. So please make sure that you're taking care of yourself.
I already want to commend you, Maria, on starting the
Yeah.
show like that, because I think it's so often, we were just talking about something very similar on Daily Brew, where it's very easy to just kind of sit down and have a conversation. And this is me coming from my perspective of like, I can do some research on the internet and I can claim to know some things about some things. And the reality is, let's first identify our shortcomings, or at least our perspective and where that's coming from. You stated it beautifully, and I appreciate it. Our live viewers are appreciating it as well. Michael, for example, says, "What an awesome way to set the stage. That is awesome." Heather says, "Love that." Vivian says, "Wow, thank you, Maria." Angela, thank you for that, Maria. So
You're so welcome.
already a great way to set the stage and sort of allow people to approach the conversation tonight however they need to. I do want to kind of understand the difference between, and this is something that I'm going to learn now, because I thought they were the same things. They are not, but eating disorders and disordered eating. So I'm super curious how that terminology, how they differ, maybe how they're the same, how one does influence the other. Because I think I use some in regular everyday conversations, like around disordered eating, but I need to understand the connection.
Yeah, and we also hear it used interchangeably. So can you help kind of clear that up for us?
Absolutely. But first, I'm going to set the stage since we set the
Oh,
stage
yeah.
before
Oh,
we set the
yes.
stage.
Yes.
So I'm going to go back and set the stage if that's okay. Just a quick background again, anybody who is unfamiliar with my work, I am a trauma-informed registered dietitian. I have a health at every size practice where I work with people who are in eating disorder recovery, who engage in disordered eating behavior, who have experienced chronic dieting for their life and are just ready to get out of this cycle. As far as my education goes, I've been a dietitian for going on 10 years, and that has evolved. It's evolved not just in that decade, but so much since when I started the show, which my first episode was almost 2 years ago, where I was running today and I'm like, oh, like, wouldn't it be funny if I got stung by a bee today and had to cancel on Ethan and Kim?
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, the first time I was on in 2019, I got stung in the face by a bee and had to go to the emergency room, and my face was like the size of just like you couldn't recognize me. So I had to cancel, and I thought that would be really ironic if that happened today, but it didn't. So Um,
I'm
but
glad
even
that
if
didn't happen. We felt so terrible for you when that happened. I think you sent photos and we were like,
I sent photos, I
oh.
was afraid you'd think I was lying or trying to get out of it.
I loved the proof though. I remember those photos. They're probably on my phone somewhere, but okay. I'm
Oh
glad you
yes,
didn't get stung
they're
today.
great. Yes, yes. So it's been really cool to see my evolution since I've been on the show. I came on and we talked about a non-diet approach and intuitive eating and what that looks like. And what's been fortunate with the extra time during the COVID shutdown is that again, through the being inspired by my clients, really taking a deep dive into um, I've been taking um, courses in continuing education and supervision. And not only am I a trauma informed dietitian, but I also use a lot of tools and techniques from polyvagal theory, which is a lot of nervous system regulation, as well as acceptance and commitment therapy, which again, has been not just helpful for my clients but also myself. So again, it's a learning alongside. I am not the expert of them by any stretch. It's I am along this ride with them.
I mean, I can already, I'm hearing the change and the things that you've learned and how you've evolved as an
Mhm.
RD. I can hear it in how you present yourself. And it's really cool to see people who are leaders in their field also continue to learn and adapt and understand how they and their perspectives need to shift and change within their own profession. So just in our way of talking about the subjects today, I can already tell, Maria, that you've come a long way. Like I'm learning just listening. So
Mhm.
this is
Awesome.
already a
I
great
appreciate
start to the
that.
conversation. Uh,
Cool.
so yeah, we were curious about the
Yeah.
connection and the differentiation between eating disorders and disordered eating.
hmm So when I think of eating disorders, which are complex mental health conditions, I think um, of them as being described in what is known as the DSM-5 or the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So that's a mouthful. It's the DSM-5. But examples include anorexia nervosa, bulimia, um, let's see, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, otherwise known as AFRID, binge eating disorders, and orthorexia, which is kind of a subset of that AFRID subtype, which is an obsession of healthy eating, which I think is important to point out because we're seeing more and more of that come through. Also, so that's eating disorders. Disordered eating behavior is engaging in behaviors where you're eating food with a lot of food rules or excluding things from your diet without a medical necessity, aka dieting. Yes, I will put my toe in that water that I say that if you are dieting, that is a disordered eating behavior. If there is no medical necessity, if there is no medical necessity for that, um, feeling stressed, anxious, or preoccupied with food, feeling guilt or shame around eating, having a really rigid eating schedule, or having a lot of flexibility about meal timing or foods, ignoring or unable to feel hunger and fullness cues. So, those are all examples of disordered eating behaviors.
Mm.
So, I imagine that, you know, all of us in this room, and I'm talking the chat room and everybody listening live, is that, there have been, at some point, I'm willing to bet that there has been some time where we have engaged in disordered eating behavior, right? That where we've second guessed. And I'm not saying that's to point fingers at all, but I'm saying this is the soup that we are all swimming in. It is everywhere and it's hard to escape. And especially in a time where social media is so prevalent and we have these, especially figures in our running community that are, sharing examples, personal examples of how they fuel themselves and Strava, what they do in a day, it can be really easy to second guess your body's wisdom.
I even just that last bit, I'm finding myself nodding my head in that it's so easy to follow people that you admire and are inspired by, and whether you see what they do for their food intake, or whether during exercise or outside of that, and there's a constant sort of comparison. Like, I find myself doing that, just like, oh, what are they doing? I'm curious, like, is this something that I should try, or that sort of thing. We're almost like constantly bombarded. It's not just diets and things like that we've talked about on the show before with you, where you're seeing Instagram ads for a new tea or something. It's not just
Right.
that. It's also sort of
Right.
the real subtle
Yeah.
things. That's really
Totally.
interesting.
There was also
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I feel like an uptick in like the what I eat in a day videos.
Oh,
Like what are those
yeah.
videos? They're like trend videos, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I feel like over the last
Yeah.
couple of years, I think there was kind of like this
Mhm.
uptick in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I couldn't care less what you eat in a day, Kim. I really couldn't. I couldn't care what you eat, Ethan, either. And my hope is that everybody that, especially the people that I'm working with, is that you can see something like that and just move on past. And I like it's funny hearing that, because I forget that it's still out there, because I've curated my feed that I don't see anything like that. And so I'm like, oh
Right.
man, are they still doing that? Come on. But just having an awareness of how does that make you feel inside when you see what someone eats, and like what what does that have to do with your decision making? I don't even understand why they feel the need to do that. Why is that important? It's just one of those things I can't figure out.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, Nicole in the chat room also brings up wearable tech, marketing, exercise equipment, food labels. The
Yes.
numbers game and diet culture is everywhere.
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 Yeah,
So
everywhere.
as people who we can kind of start here. I feel like there's already so many different tangents that we start to dig into, and I mean, we're just sort of scratching the surface with disordered eating sort of elements here.
Yeah.
In regards to people who post social media on a regular basis, or who are surfing Instagram or TikTok or something, and kind of seeing these behaviors, are there ways that we can take a step back and realize, oh, maybe me taking some images of my dinner or something, is there ways that we can do that without letting it become triggers or influencing in a negative way? Like, is there language we can use, or
Mhm.
ways that we can be aware as social media consumers, I guess?
Right. And so for the person who is posting, we can't control what others are posting, right? And it's, you can do whatever you want, right? That's your freedom. You're at liberty to do whatever you want. It's the responsibility of the person who is scrolling to be able to identify, this does not make me feel good. This makes me feel like there's something wrong with me that I need to be fixed, that I'm not living up to, that I am not good enough, and to be able to recognize that and be able to set strong boundaries. And it can be so hard. There are so many people that I am friends with and that are fantastic runners, but I don't follow them because I don't like their content. I don't like the way it makes me feel, or I don't like what they're doing, right? They're well intentioned. There's nothing, and I'm not going to be like, stop posting that, because they can do whatever they want. And I am in charge of what I see and what I do and what I take in, right? We can also choose to decide how deep we want to go in it. We can see something and slide right by, or we can, double tap on it and click on the website and click, and keep digging. But we have to pause and really, really question, how is this making me feel inside? How is this um, external uh, thing driving my behavior? Because it's not internally driven, and we're so quick to go off of external prompts, and we need to slow down and really register, because I think things come in so fast and the response happens so fast. The story to the response happens so fast, and we're in it before we can think about it. And so step number one, in like anything I do, is slowing down, noticing and naming, how are things making you feel inside, which is very difficult for a lot of people, because sometimes it's really scary to feel what's going on inside your body.
Thinking as a from less of a perspective of what am I posting and almost what am I consuming, is a really smart way of looking at it. Because you're right, we are in control of what we consume in to a certain degree, right? So it's like finding the things that do make certain things feel negative, I guess, or having some sort of internal reaction to certain things, and just not allowing those to be in your feed or in your cycle.
Yeah.
I do want to sort of begin to tackle just understanding now eating disorders and where they come from, how they develop, how is it trauma? Is it things that we can work through? How can we help identify them and within ourselves? Or I can only imagine that it's a big topic, scratching just the surface, but
Yes.
maybe I'll allow you to sort of kick us off from there.
Yes, a huge topic. And again, if this stirs up anything in anybody, that we don't get to a topic that you're wanting to know more about or just question, please, I'm super easy to get hold of. So just don't hesitate to reach out. Um, but there are many different reasons that people develop eating disorders. But one correlation I'd like to make is that the research shows that more than 75% of people with eating disorders have experienced some type of trauma in their life. And I'd really like to just kind of define what trauma is, because oftentimes when people hear trauma, it's like, oh, well, I haven't experienced trauma. I haven't gone to war or,
Right.
gone to battle or done anything like that. I haven't experienced trauma in my life. But there are what I refer to as big T traumas and little t traumas. And so big T traumas is often what the mind goes to when we think of trauma. So this could be going to war, loss of a loved one, physical or sexual abuse, surviving a natural disaster. Those are all big T traumas. But here's the thing that's really important. Trauma is extensive and it sits on a spectrum, and it's not the event that happened. Trauma is not what happened, but it's what happens in your body after surviving an event or series of events that were beyond the ability to cope at the time. So trauma is so important to discuss because it affects how we behave in the world, how we eat, how we sleep, how we our attachment with others, our ability to connect. I have to watch myself because I get really passionate about this, and I could just go on and on forever. But we as humans are wired to connect, and so it's hard when that connection feels dangerous because of trauma. And so it's like this push and pull, right? I have this biological desire to connect, but it also feels really scary because I've experienced trauma in my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big T trauma. And a small t trauma includes chronic stress, weight stigma, dieting, being told that your body is wrong consistently. Think of everybody out there who lives in a bigger body. How many times are you told that your body is wrong and needs to be fixed, right? Feeling unwelcome in your body, feeling like you do not belong, growing up with dismissive, inattentive, or unpredictable caregivers. These microaggressions can have the same effect on your nervous system as those big T traumas. And I think it's really safe to say, given that we've all lived during this global pandemic, that we've all experienced trauma. Who of us was ready to, we were so afraid we were going to kill our grandparents, and we were, Cloroxing our groceries, right? That is a trauma response to this fear of
Right.
we don't know what we're doing, right? But we're going to do this because it's going to make us feel better. It's going to make us feel like we have some control over the situation where there are so many questions going unanswered.
Right. I'm so glad for the clarification in regards to what we view trauma is. I think the most common view of trauma is that it is these big events.
A big event.
It's
yeah.
the event. And it's not the actual response that the body has to the event, or what the body that you're not able to cope with in real time or at that moment, and what your body holds on to. I think that's a huge breakthrough for a lot of people when they begin to sort of hear that it's, trauma isn't just the event itself. And to also differentiate between big T trauma and little T trauma, I think is also a wonderful clarification, because it also it gives weight to things that aren't these big events, these single sort of events, because it can be a long-term type of trauma. You listed a whole bunch there that.
Yeah. And Michael in the chat room brings up an experience from himself, just saying, for real, I've always hated the, but you don't look like a runner. So I think that would fit into the little T traumas of.
100%, Michael. Oh my gosh. I hear that almost every day.
Right.
Where people go into the doctor's office and that's the comment from the nurse practitioner or the doctor. And it sets them back so far because they're just stunned. I mean, it's that is trauma, 100%. And I'm sorry, Michael, that has been your experience.
Now sort of identifying that, I'm curious, you were saying earlier that eating disorders tend to be as a result of trauma. Is that sort of the connection? Or you said 75%, is that right?
75% of people who have eating disorders have experienced trauma. There's also a genetic predisposition, and there's also transgenerational trauma, right? You might not have experienced trauma in your life, but it could have been, your grandparents have, and it's just going down through the genetic stream, if you will. But eating disorders are, so first of all, when we don't feel safe, when we experience a trauma of some kind, we develop responses, and sometimes food is a very effective and accessible coping mechanism. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of eating disorders start at a young age. Well, if a child is not getting connection with their caregiver, it's not like they can take the car keys and get out of town and go drive to a friend's house or get in the liquor cabinet or have a cigarette, right? They're going to do what they have access to, and that's food. And there's a lot of there are a lot of things that make sense with that, because actually when we eat food, the process of chewing and putting food in our mouth, it lights up all of the pathways in our brain at the same as connection. So we get the same feeling of that we get with connection that we do when we eat food. So it makes sense that people eat food when they feel they have this unmet need or it's too scary to ask for connection. Food makes me feel good. Of course it does, because it's part of your biology, right? It's often why people bite their fingers sometimes, or fingernails. That can be something that, without being aware of it, it could be calming, right? Just that act of chewing, of putting something in your mouth. So eating disorders is our nervous system running on a fear setting. And as I kind of said very, very briefly, our nervous system is the foundation of our lived experience. It is how we move through the world. And so, I mentioned in the last Instagram post that I had that eating disorder therapy previously focused on, let's replace the negative thoughts with positive ones and use positive affirmations and self-talk and, just show that eating disorder who's boss. But it really invalidates what the role of the eating disorder, and it invalidates the person, which could have been the reason why the eating disorder started in the first place. They felt invalidated, right? And so our eating disorder behaviors are rooted in wisdom. And that's why a big part of my job is helping people understand that their eating disorder helped them survive, which is really powerful, right? Using food as a coping mechanism in the short term can help us survive. And while that's really painful, oh, why did I have to do that? Why did I, why? It would be so much easier if I didn't. But also recognize the value in that, because without that food or that behavior that you engaged in, life might have become so overwhelming that you might have fallen apart. And so being able to understand that eating disorder was there for you for a reason, and as a protective mechanism, it's there for self-preservation, not self-sabotage. when people learn that, I find that it helps to release that shame and the blame and the guilt that is often coupled with eating disorders and disordered eating behavior, because it's like, wow, my body was trying to protect me. It did. It did. It got me to be here right now. And our work is teaching the nervous system that we're safe enough now. We have choice now in our adult life in the here and now. We have choice. Whereas before we didn't have choice, but now we do. And we don't need this behavior anymore.
I can't tell you how powerful that felt just hearing you describe that, because I think it's so easy to anyone who's come forward and talked about an eating disorder to any degree. Help me, is communicating like that openly, people who have come forward and said, hey, I have or have had an eating disorder in the past. Is that part of a healing process or a part of dealing with it? Because it feels powerful when you read these stories, right? It feels like it can help someone else out there. Even just hearing what you're describing, that it's not that that it's used as a way to just maintain or to even go about your daily life. Like you're using food not as a what am I trying to say? Like it's helping them get through the process, as opposed to something that's like, I'm not drowning my sorrow in a plate of food or something. This is helping me. I might only be able to get from point A to point B with this. And that's something I don't think I've really thought through.
Yeah. And we're not, colluding with the eating disorder and being like, oh, it's a good thing, right? But we're applying the meaning behind it, right? Because oftentimes, and I know a lot of my clients, they feel like something's wrong with them, that they're broken, that they're defective, that they're beyond repair, right? But when we acknowledge really how amazing
We just, Maria, you froze for just 1 second. We'll get you back. I know we will. Stand by, everybody. We'll get Maria back. I definitely want to hear the rest of that thought. I am like overwhelmed with everything that Maria's been saying. Sorry, we just got a blip of Maria. I know we'll get her back. I'll be able to chop this part out of the after show for sure, but let me try to just reconnect with Maria there for a second. Yeah, I'm already overwhelmed with how powerful Maria is, her experience, her knowledge, her ability to communicate these things. It's amazing.
It always gives a different perspective on something that you think is just so clear, and you view it this one way and you think that's just kind of how it's always viewed. I feel like Maria has a really great way of coming at it from a different angle.
Yeah. Maria, we got you back. So sorry. We had just gotten back to your comment right after I was sort of clarifying, like what you just said was extremely powerful, very important. You had just started talking and then you froze. So if you don't mind reiterating that, I'm so sorry.
Who knows what that was. It might come back. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think I was talking about how we're not colluding with the eating disorder, but we're really thanking it. We're thanking it for its service, which sounds like a little bonkers, but if we can view it in that compassionate way instead of from a shameful place, it opens up so much space, and a lot of powerful things can happen in that space.
Understanding, I think we're establishing some incredible groundwork here. Just, Maria, again, you're educating us in a way that I'm not getting from posts or that I'm not getting from articles and things. It's the connection from trauma, the connection to disordered eating or eating disorders, and how it's a coping mechanism for potential trauma in a majority of cases, not every case, of course, as we sort of established, but sort of seeing these connections and connecting the dots. I'm curious, especially with athletes. So obviously kind of bringing it back to running and understanding the connection to athletes maybe in particular. Are there other influences at play here that make athletes more susceptible, less susceptible to eating disorders or disordered eating, or anything that we need to sort of be aware of when these conversations come up? Because they do, I feel like they happen regularly in our sport. We're seeing lots more people talk about it openly, which I think is, I can imagine, an important part of the process.
Right.
So I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah. And again, it kind of goes back to their, yes, it derives from trauma, but there's also people that have a predisposition born into their being that they're more susceptible to thinking this way. So being in an environment where you're constantly being prepared, where your Fitbit's on your watch, where the Strava is telling you that someone's stole your course record or whatever. And those who know me know that I don't use Strava, and for that particular reason, like I can't even imagine where my mental space would be if that was the case. But I know people like it for other reasons. But it's hard in this space because it is everywhere, and there are people that are more susceptible to those. And I think it's being able to recognize if you feel susceptible, if you feel like it's changing your behaviors, if it feels like you have to change what you're doing or who you are. And another thing, like with how we're usually told, is changing like how you think, right? We can't think our way out of a trauma response. We can't think our way out of, when we think, oh, we're not good enough, it's really hard to think your way out of it. And so actually a lot of the work that I do focuses not on changing what you think and feel, but your relationship with that. So have the ability and flexibility to be with all of our human experiences, the good ones, which are sometimes just as difficult as the painful ones, because sometimes, if our experience is that when something good happens, something bad happens, we might not look forward to good things, or we're waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? So can I be with and sit with the good? And that's something like everybody who are my people, they're probably like, I don't know, chuckling or rolling their eyes, but we talk about our glimmers and we savor them and we sit with them, and let's sit with that glimmer for a little bit and celebrate the good, because our brains, the way they're wired, we're constantly looking out for the bad, the negative. It's the way we're wired. Like,
I'm just letting you know you're speaking directly to me right now. You are like, what you just said is like,
with like having something good happen and then just not being able to enjoy it or celebrate it or even really recognize it, because you constantly are waiting for like the other shoe to drop.
So I'm just letting you know that I'm nodding my head. It's like, Maria, keep going. But also it's like, holy fuck, please don't stop. I don't mean to interrupt, but you are talking
no, thank you for
me.
sharing that. Yeah. And so slowing down enough to acknowledge and sit with that, because sometimes feeling the good doesn't feel safe. And again, that's the theme here. It's bringing in safety. Kim, before the show, everybody, she asked me why I was sitting somewhere different. And this is where I sit when I have sessions with clients, and it makes me feel safer. I have all my stuff, my things, I'm sitting on my pillow. Like I feel safer here. It's all about bringing safety in so that I can feel nervous and have some anxiety about doing this presentation, but I can also bring in cues of safety around me to let my system know that I am okay. And so a lot of it is slowing down and noticing the good, and also the painful and difficult experiences, being with them, being alongside them, without using eating disorder behaviors, and instead making choices that are guided by our values. And so that's a big chunk of the work that I do that is possibly different than traditional eating disorder, what you see in like treatment centers, where it's more cognitive, changing thinking and how. But honestly, and that's what in another scene, this is kind of a tangent, but I feel is really important. When people go through treatment centers, oftentimes their coping mechanism that makes them feel safe is taken away. Right? And how would you feel if your coping mechanism was taken away? You're not going to feel good. And what's going to happen as soon as you're out of there? You're going to go back to it because there's a reason behind it. And so we don't take away a resource until we find something to replace that with. And so I just want to send a lot of compassion to anybody who has gone through treatment and felt just that I've had people tell me it was the worst experience of their life. Well, of course it was, because your safety net was taken away from you. That makes so much sense that it was so miserable for you.
I'm curious. So this is a whole new facet that I'm learning. When you say replace it with something, like you don't want to take it away until you can replace it with something,
Mhm.
are you able to provide an example of what that might be?
Yeah. Oh, and it's so different for everybody. And the
Sure,
way that
totally.
I start with that is we talk about resourcing, because right now, like, whether it's food restriction, um, stepping on the scale, counting calories, micromanaging, just a hyperfixation to fix it. These are all resources that we do in order to feel okay, right? It's all about feeling safe and okay. And so we need to find resources that we can build into the system that make us feel okay. So oftentimes I call the word I use the word anchors. Like, what can anchor us? And this is a whole other conversation, but we first have to figure out, what does safety feel like? And that's different for everybody. What does safety feel like? And sometimes that's really hard to pinpoint. What does safety feel like? Okay, how can we anchor in that? What does that feel like? And I'm not talking like amazing and fantastic, but okay. What makes me feel okay? Like, um, I have a cactus pen on my desk, and it makes me feel okay because it brings up a good memory, and I can look at it and I can feel it, and it's squishy, and I can be back in the present moment because it's texturized, and I can hold this and I can feel okay. And so we're not thinking about like groundbreaking like moments, but anchors that make us feel okay in the moment, and start resourcing it. And again, it first starts by slowing down and noticing it, because again, our negative brains are so quick to skip over the good and go right to, oh, but this is happening and I got to fix it. Oh, but this is happening and this is terrible, or this is so overwhelming, I need to shut down.
Hmm. I this this is already up there with one of my favorite shows that we've done.
Yeah,
Oh,
for
Absolutely
sure.
not sugarcoating it by any means. We do have a couple of live questions. I feel like I don't want to
yes.
ignore the live chat.
Yes,
Everyone
life,
is
There's a
life
lot of great
chat.
conversation
great
happening in the
conversation
live
happening.
chat amongst each other as
Awesome.
well.
Cool.
There was a question earlier from Stephanie, and Stephanie asked, are there certain questions to ask oneself if you think so-called training or healthy behaviors and eating rituals are starting to turn into something a little more dangerous or troublesome?
Yeah. My question would be, how much time are you spending thinking about this? Like, is it taking up a lot of space in your brain, right? I think we can get so stuck on food being the end all be all, but it's one tool as part of our kit. And so really stepping back and thinking, how much of my brain am I thinking about this? Am I making a decision and asking, oh, is this the best decision? Or is this like right? Which, we can tend to do, right? We don't want to eat something and then have it derail our whole race. So I understand that. There's a sports nutrition piece to that, but it's in your day to day. If you're making a decision and second guessing yourself or questioning it, or eating and that thought of what you just ate is lingering, those I think would be some signs that it's time to be curious about what's going on there.
More question there.
Question from Michael from earlier as well. Michael asks, any advice on working with athletes who have a mindset of weight loss or calorie counting, etc., tied to running and are vocal about it in a large to medium sized running group?
Yeah. So for that person, if it's like a one-on-one, like if this person is, I'm not sure the dynamics there, if it's a friend or their running group or what it is there, but I think bringing some understanding in, like, oh, why do you want to do this? Why, and just, we don't want to like shut people down, right? Because people want to feel heard, they want to feel seen, right? Because that could be, again, the response of why they think they need to do this. They want to feel seen, they want to fit in, they want to belong. And so we want to bring some understanding there. Um, Number two, if somebody in that group is, and I have this conversation a lot with folks because group runs have started back, right? Um, like, I've done all this work, I don't want to be a part of this, and yet this person keeps talking about this, and I do not want to hear it. This is when things get a little clunky and potentially difficult, because we have to set up boundaries. And that can feel like a really difficult thing, but you don't have to go into specifics. You can say, hey, actually, that's cool that you're doing your thing, but this is not something that I'm interested in. Can we talk about this? That's all you have to say. Or excuse yourself if this person doesn't respect that, but you are in charge of what you take in.
Kind of goes right back to the consuming of social media and that whole thing.
Yeah, and just like having the power to curate what you see,
Mm-hmm.
what you expose yourself to. Yeah.
We are well, obviously we're approaching kind of the end of the hour here, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface with Maria on some of these topics. One thing I did sort of want to touch on, Maria, and please, Maria, if you have things that you do want to touch on before the end of the show, I want to make sure I give you ample time for that stuff.
Thank you.
One question that I sort of wanted to get into, at least before giving you the stage again, is in regards to young athletes, because I know the topics of today's conversation by no means are strictly for young adults or young kids, or they can be applied to multi-generation. I think you even mentioned that. We're seeing young athletes with coaches, and we're seeing a lot of things happen with young athletes, young runners, cross-country teams, stuff like that, whether it's high school, junior high, college. Things like this are being influenced across teams, right? Like coaches are telling their athletes they must lose weight, or we're hearing the language that is clearly doing damage.
Race weight,
and we're seeing athletes years later come forward and go, I have been dealing with this issue since this coach did this one thing. As parents, as anyone who's listening who might be young and might be encountering some of this stuff themselves, do you have any insight or advice on how we can at least maybe step back or identify these triggers or trauma early on?
Yeah, and I appreciate that question. And for parents out there, I just want to send a lot of compassion your way, because what a world to navigate with kids right now. So having to deal with this on top of it, it just is so difficult. Talk about feeling too much. That's just a lot. So I just want to send a lot of compassion your way. The biggest guidance I can offer on that is to talk with your child and your young athlete and ask them, how does it make you feel going to practice every day? How do you feel around your coach? Because and the trick here is that sometimes, we get the automatic answer of, "Oh, I'm fine," right? How many times a day do we say that in our day-to-day life? "How are you today?" "Oh, I'm fine, I'm good." When your nervous system is like, "No, we're not. What are you talking about? No, we're not. Liar," right? We're so quick, "Oh, I'm good. I'm fine," right? So getting them in a place where they can feel, again, bringing that safety, they can feel safe to be like, you know what? My coach actually makes me feel a little bad about myself, or he made me feel sad today, or I felt a little embarrassed. So I would open up a dialogue with your young athlete in that way of just curiosity. How was it for you today? And check in often.
I think it's great.
And just to follow up, Michael, who was the last question there, said, big thanks, Maria. Your example of setting the stage before setting the stage was a great example for me as well. I lead the group, so it's super important for me to set a tone. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Michael.
Yeah.
Setting the stage before setting the stage. We're going to use that multiple times from here on out. That's just, again, a testament to Maria's sort of knowledge and expertise in these topics of conversation. It's always so great to have them. So Maria, I kind of want to allow you to have some time, because I'm sure you always come to our show well prepared, well versed, well educated in everything that you're about to talk about. And I'm sure I always end up skipping over big paragraphs or things that we want to, or at least are important to discuss. So if there's anything that you feel like we didn't touch on today, or maybe that could help this conversation, I just want to give you the free moment to sort of discuss those things. Maybe something that we didn't touch on. Is there anything that comes to mind as far as we need to make sure that we cover this sort of thing?
I think, again, we opened up, the window a little bit into, we can see the nuance of this. And I think that's really important. And again, if this stirs up further questions with anybody that you don't feel, weren't able to get to tonight or didn't feel comfortable asking, please, my inbox is open. um, I can't see. Again, you would know that I wasn't here, right? Your nervous system's registered that. Ted came in and put a note and said, don't forget to share client emails input, which is what I was building up to.
You guys
Thanks,
are a
Dad.
great team.
You
I
guys
got
are a
it.
great team.
Great team.
This was the grand finale. I was building up the momentum. So anyway, I don't even know what I was saying before this, but I do want to say that my clients are some of the most amazing people, and I love them so much, and they are so special to me. And before coming on tonight's show, I asked them, what is it that you would like the larger running community to know? And all of these folks are runners themselves. And so again, my job, my passion is to elevate their experience. And so if it's okay with everyone, if I can share some of the points that they would like you all to know, would that be okay?
That sounds
Yeah.
fantastic.
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm just going to read them off. And I apologize to all my folks if I, skip a line or two or don't read it how you intended it to be. So here we go. Eating disorders are not limited to those in small bodies. In the running world, there's a tendency to focus on eating disorders in those runners who are very small, and the whole message is eat more, fuel more, with no discussion of the actual mental, emotional side of things. I think there is not much mentioned about all the different types of eating disorders, and that people with eating disorders don't all look one particular way. And just to piggyback on that, that is one of my personal biggest pet peeves is when, we see thin-bodied people eating their ice cream pizza and saying, "Look at me, I'm eating it," and then the response that I hear is, "Well, they can do that; they're small." Mm-hmm. I want to bring in awareness that men struggle with eating disorders and body image as well. Half my clients are men. And there's a lot of voice out there, which is awesome for women, but we also can't forget that men struggle just as much. Overall, my message is that I wish we were all kinder to ourselves. We live in an extremely diet-focused society that can make people feel like failures if we don't look a certain way. The process to get out of this mindset is challenging, but so worth it. Is every day easy? Hell no. This is work. But if there is someone else out there struggling, just know that things can get better. You are not the problem. There's a podcast recommendation. I second this one. Everyone should listen to Maintenance Phase. It's a game changer for how you will think about diet culture, and you get to laugh. So it's a win-win there. I'll be listening to it while I run, and I'll have to stop running because I'm laughing too hard. So it's a good one. It's a good one. This is in regards to social media. Stop following things that make you feel crappy. I follow things that make me smile and laugh. I had to get rid of anything diet related. I don't want to see calories. I don't want to see macro counts on recipes, what I ate in a day videos, etc. Don't comment on anyone's weight or appearance. You do not know what they're going through, and it is just so unnecessary. What people look like or weigh does not matter, and we need to stop doing it as a society. If someone is interested in changing their behavior, it's going to get super uncomfortable to sit in those feelings and thoughts, and that's okay. Learning that was the hardest thing ever, but it really is okay. I would take that feeling any day over going back to dieting. I want people to know that fat is not the enemy to be vanquished, avoided, cut off, sucked out, abandoned, reviled, and feared. Body obsession is inextricably linked to eating disorders, but it can express in different ways. Not all eating disorders are obsessed with thinness. People with AFRID might be terrified of choking, but that's still an obsession with the physical body. It's an overwhelming, all-consuming, physically distressing mental illness. It's probably one of, if not the most difficult symptom to overcome, live with, and manage. It kills people. Eating disorders are the deadliest mental illness. Just eat a burger is not the kind of help we need. Eating disorders are life thieves because they steal your identity and replace it with its own need for self-preservation. It's like a parasite that takes over and your only function becomes its survival. It's like the eating disorder takes over your entire mind and personality. You totally lose yourself. Part of recovery is discovering who you really truly are, and it's both exciting and extremely hard work. I'd give anything to never have to recover from an eating disorder. I wouldn't wish this hardship on Satan himself. Okay, maybe Satan, but that's how bad it is. Eating disorders suck. Recovery sucks. But of course, recovery is absolutely worth it. It's just really hard work. I want people to understand that disordered eating comes in many forms. You can be thin, fat, or anywhere in between and have disordered eating. The preoccupation on losing weight through restrictive diets is as mentally and emotionally consuming as the preoccupation with health through rigid, restrictive diets. Anorexia, bulimia, orthorexia, binge eating, it's all the same obsession. It's all the same suffering. And the last point, recovery is the hardest thing I've ever done. It's beyond worth it, but it is extremely hard. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who shared their just wise and passionate thoughts.
Please, yeah, on behalf of us and our viewers, please thank them as well. It's one thing to you talk about these subjects and try to learn a little bit about them. It's another thing to hear the words from people who are dealing with it, because I think it helps it feel more human, and it helps sort of be able to relate, because I think there's a lot that we discussed in tonight's show that a lot of people will be nodding their heads to, or at least looking at things through a bit of a different lens, maybe more accepting and feeling less shame, less blame. Maria Dalzot, our registered dietitian guest tonight, with a lot of incredible insight into understanding eating disorders in athletes, but really in anybody. I highly encourage you to reach out to Maria. So Maria, I want to also give you the opportunity to sort of mention, how can people reach out to you? You are taking clients, I'm assuming, and I know that we'll definitely have some viewers or listeners who will want to discover or talk about things that maybe they're dealing with someone like you. How can they reach out?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And my schedule is what I'm telling people is that if you can find a spot on the schedule, it's yours. So check that out. I'm pretty full for the next month, but as long as you can find a spot on the schedule, I will be most happy to speak with you. You can find everything that you need to know at my website at Maria Dalzot, my full name, RD, which stands for registereddietitian.com. You can reach out to me in any way that feels comfortable to you. And it's really important to me that I get back to you in a really timely way. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Again, our guest tonight, Maria Dalzot, is always a wealth of knowledge and experience, and it's just a pleasure to have her on the show, especially to talk about subjects like this, which are incredibly important to talk about. So mariadalzotrd.com is where you can find out more information. And again, those who are watching live or listening or any of that sort of stuff, thank you as well. And thank you to everyone who shared their stories with Maria to share on tonight's show as well. That definitely takes some courage, and we appreciate you being so open with your stories. We're going to wrap up our main... Absolutely, Maria. Absolutely. We are going to wrap up our main show. We are going to move into our after show with Maria. We're only going to keep it for about 5 or 10 minutes, but we do have, some residual questions and anything like that. If you would like to join our after show, it's very easy to do. Just go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner. All tiers get access to all of our after shows. Before we move into the after show, though, we do like to recognize members of the community who go above and beyond. We call them our GR crew members of the week. Kim, you've already pulled some GR crew members this week. Pretty excited about this one.
I did. And just really quickly before I get into the GR crew members of the week, I do want to welcome Karen Petty.
Karen Petty
joined the super.
Oh yeah, she's a member. She's a channel member now.
Channel member. Yeah. There we are. I'm sorry I didn't give you a shout out earlier in the show, Karen, but thank you and welcome. And this week's GR crew members of the week is very exciting. Very happy news. We just wanted to congratulate Eugene and Melissa, who snuck off into the mountains at like 2:30 in the morning to climb up to a beautiful spot to get married. So congratulations. It's
so cool. The pictures, I think, are they are coming soon, because I believe our good friend Ryan Thor was up there taking some photos and stuff like that. But they are crew members, and they got married. They tied the knot on the top of a mountain So cool. This happened last week, so congratulations to both of them. Happy to have seen that. That's can't wait to see the pictures.
Good
and stuff
stuff.
like that.
Yeah.
That is going to wrap up Ginger Runner Live, episode number 365. We appreciate you tuning in to tonight or listening if you're listening on the podcast. I swallowed my spit wrong.
And that's how you end a show.
And that's how you end the show. I'm just hacking into the microphone. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in live. We'll see you next week for more Ginger Runner Live, of course, or daily on Daily Brew. Go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner to watch that. Thanks, everyone, so much. We hope you're getting out there, training hard, racing harder, and partying the hardest. We know we are. See you
Thanks,
guys next week.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ginger Runner.